I think the article, I was addressing the premises of literally feral people who are living in the national forest, national parks.
Deep in the heart of America's national parks, something terrifying is being uncovered.
Something comes about that posits, what if the national parks are home to clans of feral cannibal people? And you know what? Maybe they're not too far off.
Not animals, not myths. Actual humans who live completely off the grid, untouched by modern society, and possibly hiding in plain sight. For years, hikers have gone missing without a trace. Strange sounds have echoed through the trees, and locals whisper about wild figures watching from the shadows. Now, new reports and chilling encounters are forcing people to ask, who are these people? Where did they come from? And what is really going on deep within the national parks? Join us in this video as we uncover every detail about how the feral people were just discovered. Vanished without a trace. The mystery behind America's national parks. America's national parks are usually regarded as breathtaking escapes from the chaos of modern life. These locations are well known for their natural beauty, which includes towering mountains, ancient forests, and quiet rivers. But beneath the postcard-perfect surface lies a darker, more disturbing reputation. Disappearances, and not just a few. Hundreds of people have gone missing, and many have never been found. Families are left shattered, with just questions. There is no resolution, no clues, just silence. This frightening reality has inspired creepy speculations and urban legends, particularly in areas like the Grand Canyon and the Great Smoky Mountains, where folklore is abundant and mysterious events continue to intrigue people's attention. One story has gripped the public more than any other: reports of wild people living deep within national parks. These aren't just wild hermits fleeing society. The legends depict dangerous, isolated groups, with some even suggesting cannibalism or kidnapping. And no place is brought up more than the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. With its proximity to Appalachia and countless backcountry trails, it's the perfect backdrop for legends to grow legs. This park is the fourth deadliest in the country. Its difficult terrain and extensive nature make it easier to disappear without a trace. Instead of attributing it to accidents or nature's unpredictability, some feel something or someone else is to blame. In 2021, a TikTok user named @jbebe96 fueled the fire. She posted that what freaked her out most was feral people living in our national parks. Her video, referencing Tennessee and Kentucky, went viral, amassing nearly 1 million likes and over 50,000 shares. No evidence was ever presented, but the story spread like wildfire, helped along by other viral posts, conspiracy threads, and even an episode of American Horror Stories titled Feral. Despite all the hype, no evidence has ever emerged. No sightings on the trails. There are no verified encounters. Experts advise hikers to stick to established pathways, as no such beings have ever been documented. However, the question remains, where did it all begin? Like most conspiracy theories, the idea didn't start out of nowhere. It likely began with unexplained incidents, stories that left just enough room for imagination to take over. And once that spark was lit, especially with the power of social media, it became a wildfire too big to put out. But what really happens when a feral person never gets found? Keep watching to find out. The Vanishing of Dennis Martin, a case that never faded. Of all the chilling stories tied to America's national parks, none has fueled the myth of feral people quite like the case of Dennis Martin. In June 1969, 6-year-old Dennis was on a camping trip with his family in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. What was meant to be a fun outing turned into a lifelong nightmare when Dennis vanished while playing hide-and-seek near Spence Field. One moment, he was there. The next, gone. As panic set in, his family searched desperately before alerting park rangers. What followed was one of the most massive search efforts in national park history. Rangers, local police, Boy Scouts, and even the U.S. Army's Green Berets joined in, combing 56 square miles of rugged wilderness. Despite their efforts, no trace of Dennis was ever found. At one point, searchers discovered footprints near Eagle Creek, some barefoot, some made by a sneaker. Oddly, they were quickly dismissed as belonging to Boy Scouts, even though no Boy Scout troop had passed through that area. The only known groups were the search teams and the Green Berets. Then, about a month later, a new lead surfaced. A man named Harold Key stepped forward with a disturbing account. While hiking with his family in a different area of the park, Harold heard a scream, loud, gut-wrenching, and unlike anything he'd ever heard before. "We heard a scream, a trouble scream," he recalled. "An enormous, sickening scream. We couldn't tell where it came from, but it sounded like it came from higher up on the mountain." Shortly after the scream, Harold spotted a man moving quickly through the woods, trying to stay hidden. His first thought? A moonshiner. Someone who didn't want to be found. But something didn't sit right. What made the story even more unsettling was the location, 5 to 7 miles from where Dennis had disappeared. It seemed impossible for a young boy, or even an adult carrying one, to travel that far in such a short time. Still, Harold stood by his account. He even drew a map showing exactly where he saw the man. Yet nothing was ever found in that area. And so, the questions began. Who was that man? Why was he hiding? Was it connected to Dennis's disappearance? While no evidence ever confirmed the presence of feral people, this story planted a seed in the public imagination, one that has only grown over time. To this day, the mystery of Dennis Martin's disappearance continues to haunt the Smokies and fuels the unsettling idea that something, or someone, may be lurking in the shadows of our most beautiful wild places. But can we call everyone who decides to go off the grid feral? Stay tuned to find out. Not feral, just forgotten. The truth about off-grid living. In the midst of outrageous conspiracy theories, it's easy to forget a basic fact. Not everyone who lives off the beaten path is dangerous. In reality, many Americans opt to live off the grid for a variety of reasons, including necessity, serenity, and personal preference. Some choose a quiet, self-sufficient lifestyle in the forests or mountains. Others are simply trying to live, living on the margins of society in small cottages or makeshift shelters. However, this is where things turn difficult. When people start using the term feral to describe those who live without modern amenities, they cross a line. It turns everyday people, hermits, homesteaders, or struggling families into monsters in the public eye. And that's not just unfair, it's dangerous. These folks aren't lurking in the woods, waiting to snatch unsuspecting hikers. They're growing food, chopping firewood, hunting for game, and often doing their best to provide for their families with limited resources. Yes, they may depend on nature more than the normal individual. However, this does not make them feral. Rather, it makes them resourceful. Unfortunately, the emergence of viral videos has led to reckless assumption. TikTok user @BonjourBecky and others have criticized these articles, pointing out their weak logic. The bulk of disappearances in national parks are caused by natural circumstances such as becoming lost, severe weather, or slipping off unmarked trails, rather than secretive mountain tribes. Nonetheless, deception has real-world repercussions. When stories are told without facts, innocent people are scapegoated, and those who simply want to live quietly are suddenly painted as villains in someone else's horror story. Before spreading wild theories about cannibalistic mountain folk, it's worth asking, who's being hurt by this narrative? The answer might surprise you. So what happens when off-grid life takes a darker turn? Let's find out. The People in White, one hiker's terrifying encounter. In 2007, the film Into the Wild captured the hearts of adventurers everywhere. Based on the real story of Christopher McCandless, a young man who gave up everything to live off the grid in Alaska, it sparked a new wave of outdoor wanderers. One of them was 18-year-old Matt from Oregon. Inspired by McCandless's courage, Matt set out on a solo journey in 2008 to hike the California stretch of the Pacific Crest Trail, a 1,700-mile trek through deserts, mountains, and remote wilderness. Matt was no stranger to the outdoors. He'd hiked across Oregon and the western U.S., confident in his survival skills, but nothing could prepare him for what he would face in Lassen National Forest. It started with a strange sight. Two middle-aged people dressed in white, sitting silently on a boulder, staring at Matt as he passed. They didn't wave, smile, or speak, just watched him in eerie silence. He brushed it off, assuming it was a weird encounter with fellow hikers. But that night, his food bag vanished from the tree where he'd hung it, and around his tent were boot prints. Human ones. Not his. He hadn't heard a sound. Whoever stole his food had walked silently through his camp, leaving no trace except footprints. The next few nights passed without incident, and Matt began to relax, until he awoke one night to the sound of snapping sticks and soft whispers circling his tent. Again, there were boot prints surrounding his camp by morning. It wasn't a dream. Someone had been there, inches from where he slept. Then came the moment that confirmed his fears. Over 50 miles north in Mount Shasta, a place with its own dark reputation, Matt saw them again. Two white figures, far back on the trail, following him. Somehow, they had tracked him for days, across rugged terrain, through dense forests, and into remote campsites. Panicked, Matt ran. Through the woods, over miles of trails, until nightfall. He camped far off the trail, setting up a ring of sticks to detect intruders. But deep into the night, he awoke to whispers, snapping branches, and a light shining on his tent. He leapt from his tent, knife in hand, just in time to see a shadow rushing toward him. He ran, terrified and barefoot, until he found a hollow under a fallen tree to hide. There he stayed, hidden until the next afternoon. He left all his gear behind, ran to the nearest town, and reported everything to the authorities. Others had reported stolen gear, but no one else had been followed, stalked, and hunted through the woods. To this day, Matt has no idea who the people in white were, how they tracked him, or what they wanted beyond a bag of food.
He said in the middle of the night, something that was making some odd sound came out of the wilderness and into their campsite. It took all of their food.
But one thing is certain, he never saw them again, and he never returned to the trail. So how does one become a feral person? Keep watching to find out. Feral people, the line between myth and tragedy. Before jumping to conclusions about mysterious figures in the woods, it's important to ask, what actually makes someone feral? In truth, the term refers to individuals who have grown up with little or no human contact, often in extreme isolation. Deprived of language, affection, and basic social interaction during their early years, they develop without a sense of normal human behavior. And once that critical window for learning language and social skills passes, it becomes nearly impossible to catch up. One of the most heartbreaking examples is the story of Jeannie, a girl who was rescued in 1970 after spending the first 13 years of her life locked in a small room, neglected and abused. She couldn't speak, didn't understand how to interact with others, and struggled to connect emotionally. Despite the care she received after her rescue, the damage done during those critical years left deep, irreversible marks. Another real-life case is that of Oksana Malaya, a Ukrainian girl who, abandoned at a young age, survived by living with dogs. By the time she was found at age 8, she barked, ran on all fours, and behaved more like a dog than a human. These stories aren't legends. They're deeply tragic and real. And they remind us that what we often call feral is usually the result of profound trauma, not a choice. Yet over time, media and pop culture have turned this concept into something more dramatic and more frightening. From ancient legends like Romulus and Remus to modern horror movies like The Descent, the idea of humans living wild has been twisted into a nightmare. Feral characters are often shown as cannibalistic monsters, stalking innocent travelers in remote places. Books, films, and viral online stories add fuel to this narrative, often blurring the lines between truth and fiction. But the truth is far more somber. Behind every so-called feral person is usually a story of suffering, abandonment, or severe neglect. These are not creatures of the forest. They are people who were failed by the world in their most vulnerable years. So as we explore strange tales and chilling encounters in national parks, we must remember to separate fantasy from fact. Because while the stories may be gripping, the real lives behind these myths are often filled with pain, not horror. But what connection does feral people have with Appalachia? Let's find out. The Wild Men of Appalachia, legend, truth, or something in between. Appalachia is a land shrouded in mist and mystery, and the trees appear to whisper ancient secrets. For years, local mythology has sung of wild men lurking deep in the hollows, beast-like entities covered in hair who dwell undetected amid the shadows and occasionally emerge in violent spurts of wrath. To some, they're nothing more than mountain myths, but others aren't so quick to dismiss them. In 1877, a group of miners near Linville, North Carolina claimed they were chased by a giant, naked wild man. Their description sounded eerily similar to Native American stories of the Sasquatch, stories that long predate European settlers. How could such distant cultures speak of the same type of creature? Coincidence? Or something more? Skeptics are quick to scoff, and understandably so. Hard evidence is rare, and the tales often blur into exaggeration. But having explored these ancient woods, people have said that there are places out there where logic begins to loosen its grip. Strange things happen in the silence of the forest. Still, if feral people seem too far-fetched, could something more grounded be behind these tales? Hermits, people who deliberately cut ties with society, have occasionally been discovered living in the wilderness. Take Eric Rudolph, the Olympic Park bomber. He survived for 5 years in the Appalachian wilderness, eluding authorities in one of the most densely wooded areas of the country. If he could do it, why not others? Of course, living off the grid isn't easy. Hunting, foraging, staying warm, these all take skill, especially with today's surveillance, drones, and trail cams everywhere. But for someone determined, reclusive, and well-prepared, the deep woods still offer the kind of isolation modern society can't reach. That said, if such individuals exist, and they may well, our curiosity must be tempered by respect. These individuals might not want to be found. Forcing them back into the world they left behind could be harmful, not beneficial. There are additional considerations at play. These regions are more than just wildness. They are sacred. Many are deeply rooted in Native American customs and spirituality. Any attempt to seek out hidden individuals must tread carefully, honoring both people and place. At the end of the day, whether we're talking about wild men, reclusive hermits, or misunderstood wanderers, one truth remains. If someone has chosen to disappear into the woods, we owe them the dignity of peace. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some are meant to be respected. What if the tales about feral people are actually real? Let's find out more. The last mystery, between curiosity and compassion. The thought of feral people lurking in the bush evokes strong emotions. It's not just about terror and mythology. It's about the thrill of the unknown, the belief that there are still uncharted territories in a world that appears to be mapped and measured. This fascination is shared by online groups where people trade hypotheses, anecdotes, and fuzzy photographs that may signify anything. But with excitement comes responsibility. We can't let our quest for answers devolve into reckless speculation or destructive misconceptions. Cryptozoology, if regarded seriously, must be founded on thorough consideration and respect for people, science, and truth. This journey isn't about headlines. It's about slow, steady steps toward understanding. If feral people do exist, it won't be a tabloid revelation. It will be a deeply human story that calls for empathy, not spectacle. Because when such individuals are found, what comes next is no easy task. Raised without human connection, they often can't speak, socialize, or even care for themselves in basic ways. That's why we must ask, is reintegrating someone who is feral truly the best path? Or would they be better off staying close to the only world they've ever known, one of trees, rivers, and silence? With gentle care, perhaps they can find peace within the place that unknowingly raised them. Scientifically, hard proof of feral people remains scarce. Most experts argue that without social contact, full human development simply can't happen. And yet stories like Oksana Malaya, who lived among dogs in Ukraine, force us to rethink our assumptions. The more we learn, the clearer it becomes. Our identities are built through connection, and when that's missing, the results can be startling. But science must stay open. Some truths only reveal themselves at the edges of what we think we know. Maybe, just maybe, the next great discovery won't come from a lab, but from deep within a forgotten forest. The line between myth and reality is still blurry. Maybe it always will be. But if there's one thing I've learned chasing nature's greatest secrets, it's this. The world is far more mysterious than we often allow ourselves to believe. Somewhere out there, hidden beneath the canopy, the next chapter waits. All we have to do is turn the page. So, let us dive into some real stories about feral people who were discovered. The real-life Mowgli, Dina Sanichar's heartbreaking journey. Long before the Jungle Book enchanted the world, a real boy lived the wild tale that would inspire it. His name was Dina Sanichar, and his early years were spent not in a village, but in the dense jungles of Uttar Pradesh, India, raised by wolves. When hunters discovered him in 1867, crouched among a pack in a dark den, they couldn't believe their eyes. The boy moved on all fours, growled and howled like the animals he called family. To save him, they smoked the wolves out of the cave and took the child back to civilization, though the journey that followed would be anything but smooth. At the Sikandra Mission Orphanage in Agra, Sanichar was given a name, clothes, and care. But the years in the jungle had left a mark too deep to erase. He refused cooked food, preferring raw meat and bones, and sniffed everything before eating, just like a wolf would. He couldn't speak, didn't understand gestures like pointing, and showed no connection to human customs. Though he gradually learned to stand, dress himself, and even picked up smoking from those around him, the bond between him and the human world never truly formed. The missionaries did their best. They trained him to eat with utensils and walk properly. But words and genuine human connection were eternally out of grasp. Despite their attempts, Dina Sanichar remained a boy trapped between two worlds, truly belonging to neither. He died of tuberculosis at the age of 35, having never spoken a word. Sanichar's story reminds us that beneath the wild mythology are real people, youngsters who had no choice in their situations. His life was not a fairy tale. It was a silent tragedy. It also encourages us to dig deeper when we hear stories about feral people. Sometimes what appears to be folklore is actually a plea for understanding. But Dina wasn't the only child shaped by isolation. What happened to America's most tragic case? Keep watching to find out. Jeannie Wiley, America's most tragic feral child. In the heart of suburban Los Angeles, behind the closed doors of an ordinary-looking home, one of the most disturbing stories of isolation and mistreatment unfolded. Born in 1957, Jeannie Wiley was kept hidden from the world by her father, Clark Wiley, who treated her not as a child, but as a prisoner. For 13 long years, Jeannie lived in silence, strapped to a potty chair during the day, locked in a crib or cage at night.
Pull-down chicken wire lid and some type of piece of wire securing it when they closed it down. There was a potty chair.
She was beaten if she made a sound. Her father even barked and growled at her like an animal. She never learned to talk, to play, or to simply be a child. When Jeannie and her nearly blind mother finally escaped in 1970, it wasn't a planned rescue, it was a mistake. Her mother had walked into a social services office by accident, but that mistake may have saved Jeannie's life. The workers were horrified by her appearance and behavior. At first, they suspected autism, but soon, the shocking truth came out. Jeannie wasn't autistic. She was a feral child, a victim of unimaginable mistreatment. Her father avoided justice by taking his own life, leaving behind a chilling note: "The world will never understand." What followed was a mix of science and controversy. Researchers from the National Institute of Mental Health saw Jeannie as a rare opportunity to study the effects of extreme isolation. From 1971 to 1975, she became the subject of intense testing and observation. While she did learn some words and disproved the belief that language couldn't be learned after puberty, she never fully grasped grammar or complex speech. But the research itself raised serious ethical questions. Jeannie lived with some of the scientists who studied her, blurring the lines between care and experiment. In 1979, her mother sued the researchers, accusing them of using Jeannie for fame instead of truly helping her. The case was quietly settled years later, and Jeannie was left to drift between foster homes, some of them abusive. Today, Jeannie is still alive, now in her 60s, living in an assisted care facility. But she remains a shadow of what she might have been. Her story isn't just a scientific case study. It's a haunting reminder of what happens when a child is denied love, freedom, and a voice. Jeannie Wiley didn't grow up in the wild, but her suffering was just as raw and just as real. From silent suffering to royal fascination, how much can a child endure before losing their place in the world? Stay tuned to find out more. Peter the Wild Boy. a royal curiosity with a tragic past. In 1725, deep in the German wilderness, villagers stumbled upon a sight they wouldn't forget. A naked boy, around 11 years old, wandering alone through the forest. He couldn't speak, avoided human contact, and refused to wear clothes. No one knew his real name, but they called him Peter. Most believed he had been abandoned, left to survive on his own in the wild. A year later, Peter's life took a strange turn. He was brought to London and introduced to none other than King George I. Fascinated by the wild boy, the royal court turned Peter into a kind of living exhibit, a human curiosity. He ran on all fours through Kensington Palace, picked pockets, and even stole kisses from startled courtiers.
They were charmed by his encounters with civilization, but sometimes he would do something a bit too wild, like picking their pockets.
Rumors swirled that Peter had been raised by wolves or bears, as his animal-like behavior seemed far removed from normal human upbringing. During the Age of Enlightenment, Peter's case raised deep questions among scholars. What truly makes someone human? Is it language, behavior, or something deeper? But despite the philosophical wonder surrounding him, the royal fascination wore off. Peter's messy table manners and insistence on sleeping on the floor made him less welcome in high society. Eventually, the court paid for Peter to live out his days on a farm in Hertfordshire. The farmers treated him kindly, but he wore a collar with an eerie inscription: Peter, the Wild Man of Hanover. Whoever will bring him to Mr. Fenn at Bermstead shall be paid for their trouble. Even in his so-called retirement, he was treated more like lost property than a person. Peter died in 1785 and was buried at St. Mary's in North Church. Years later, experts examined his portraits and concluded he may have had Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, a rare genetic disorder that causes facial differences and developmental challenges. That diagnosis, though made centuries after his death, may help explain why Peter was abandoned in the first place. From one wild tale to another, how do we separate innocence from illusion when the past is wrapped in mystery? Let's find out. The strange case of Casper Hauser, feral boy or master faker. On May 26, 1828, the quiet city of Nuremberg, Germany, was shaken by the sudden appearance of a teenage boy. Clothed in rags and barely able to speak, the 16-year-old introduced himself only as Casper Hauser. He seemed completely lost, unable to read, write, or recall his past. All he carried were two strange letters, one supposedly from his mother and another addressed to a cavalry captain, urging that Casper be placed into the military. But the details felt off. When questioned, Casper could barely form sentences. He refused everything except bread and water, and he walked as if it was a brand new skill. The only word he spoke with any confidence? Horse. Authorities took him in, confused and intrigued. Quickly, a nobleman named Lord Stanhope became his guardian, and within weeks, Casper was reportedly learning to read and write, something that would have been nearly impossible if he'd truly grown up in isolation. But Hauser claimed he had lived in a pitch-dark cell for most of his life, without contact, before a mysterious man brought him to Nuremberg and left him. Poet and scholar Georg Friedrich Dahmer studied Casper closely. The boy told tales that didn't always match, one moment saying he lived in a dungeon, the next describing dreams of a grand castle. That didn't stop rumors from swirling. Some believed Casper was a missing prince, hidden away to protect a royal secret. Others thought he was a disturbed orphan who made up his entire story to gain sympathy and status. As the years passed, Casper's life became even more mysterious. There were strange incidents, suspicious injuries, and alleged assassination attempts. In 1833, he was fatally stabbed. While some claimed a stranger had assassinated him, others believed Casper stabbed himself in a failed bid for attention, only to misjudge the wound. Was he truly a feral child abandoned by society, or a gifted manipulator looking for love, belonging, or maybe just a story to call his own? Nearly 200 years later, Casper Hauser remains one of the most puzzling figures in history, a symbol of both tragedy and unanswered questions. So what are your thoughts on feral people? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.